This week's portion, Mishpatim, in some ways is seen as an expansion of last week's portion, Yitro. In that portion, the Israelites are gathered at Mount Sinai, and God reveals God's presence to the entire community, and the people hear what are known as the 10 Commandments, these 10 foundational principles on what it means to be part of this covenanted community, the community of Israel with God, and these 10 basic principles that allow us to lead a religious, moral, and ethical life. The portion Mishpatim expands upon those principles and provides us with very specific laws about how society can run smoothly. A lot of them have to do with business, but a lot also has to do with interpersonal relations. The fascinating and challenging part of the portion is the very first group of laws that are presented, which are concerning slavery. And so in 2016, it seems quite anachronistic to be reading a text from the Torah, which is supposed to be the eternal text of the Jewish people, to be reading a section that totally is irrelevant to our lives today and could even be understood as barbaric. And so I'd like to suggest two ways to understand this reading so that we can continue to read the Torah in its entirety and continue to find relevance and eternal values for us today. One way to understand this presentation of the laws of slavery is that within the context of the time itself, those laws were quite radical and progressive. We have to remember that the people themselves had just been slaves in Egypt, but they're coming from a worldview in which it is taken for granted that people can be slaves, that depending on life circumstances, or even in some societies in how one is born, one understands that slavery is part and parcel of human experience. And the laws as presented in this week's portion are quite different and more progressive and more ethical within the context of 3,000 years ago. Another way to understand that section of law is to understand it more globally that law, and especially law as presented in the Torah, is a dynamic system. Law is not meant to be understood as given at one time to be followed in that particular way for all time. We understand that law, especially as given in the Torah, is meant to be fluid and constantly reinterpreted. If the laws of slavery come in the Torah in contradistinction to how the people just led their lives, then how much more so should we continue to interpret the laws of the Torah to ensure that they still have meaning for us today. Hopefully with these understandings of the portion Mishpatim, we won't be turned off by the Torah, but rather be motivated and inspired by the Torah even today. Shabbat Shalom.